Welcome everyone to this meeting, the first of our communications outreach and for community groups for the priority 2 basins that are now going to be participating in Valley Water Collaborative. And before we get started, I want to do introductions of the Valley Water staff and also our consultants, GEI and Ludor Scalmanini. And I'll start out with myself. I'm Perry Clausen. I'm Executive Director of Valley Water Collaborative, and go over next to Maureen.
Hi, everyone. I'm Maureen Thompson with Valley Water Collaborative.
Eva.
Eva Dwyer with Valley Water Collaborative.
And Jesus.
Jesus Nunez with Valley Water Collaborative.
And then Ezra.
Yes, I'm Ezra Clausen with Valley Water Collaborative.
And before we go to the consultants, we have a distinguished board member on that I think Paul should introduce himself because he is a board member since day one. Paul?
Yep. Hi, everyone. My name is Paul Huckaba with Bronco Wine Company. And as Perry mentioned, I serve on the board of Valley Water Collaborative.
Thanks, Paul. Okay, let's start with Richard Meyerhoff with GEI.
And good afternoon. I'm Richard Meyerhoff with GEI Consultants, part of the technical team working on implementation of the program.
Great, and Jackie.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jackie Takeda. I also work with GEI with Richard Meyerhoff and also part of the technical team.
And I see Chris. You go by Christian or Chris?
Christian.
Yeah, if you would introduce yourself, please.
Hey everyone, my name is Christian Lopez Flores. I'm a part of GEI and I'm assisting Jackie and Richard.
Great, thanks, Christian. And with Ludor Scalmanini Consulting Engineers, Vicky Grabert.
Hey everyone, Vicky Kresinger Grabert with Ludor Scalmanini Consulting Engineers, also part of the technical team helping with program development. And Barb's.
Yeah, thanks.
Hi.
And Barb.
Yep. Hi, everybody. My name is Barb Dalgish. I am also part of the technical team. I work for Ludor Scalmanini Consulting Engineers.
Well, thanks, everybody. And we'll go ahead and start our PowerPoint. And I see a couple of more have joined. Anybody need Spanish translation? And if so, wave your hand or digital hand.
Hola, vamos a empezar la junta brevemente. Si hay alguien que quisiera escucharla en español, por favor, háganoslo saber. Pueden hablar o pueden alzar la mano en el cuarto Zoom.
All right, Maureen, let's go ahead and share the PowerPoint. Yeah, and so this is, as we mentioned, this is the first of our Priority 2 Basin Community Outreach and Engagement meetings. We are holding this first meeting with all the Priority 2 basins that are currently committed to joining Valley Water, participating in Valley Water. And in the future, when we start developing the preliminary management zone proposal, we will be having specific meetings for these various basins, as there's going to be quite a bit of information that's specific to those basins. Today, we're going to talk mostly about the things that apply to all the areas, although we do have a presentation on some of the early data analysis that shows where our nitrate issues are in the priority 2 basins. So the next slide. Also, before we go too much further, we will make this PowerPoint available. In fact, it was, I don't think it was sent out, but we will make this available to folks that are signed up or for our community type meetings. So we'll send this out. And this is the team that you were just introduced to. So on the next slide. The meeting agenda today, I'll give you a little introduction on Valley Water. Many of you are aware of the organization, but just so we can all be on the same footing for folks that are new, I'll talk a little bit about what Valley Water is and what we've been doing for the last 3 years. Then Richard will be going over the nitrate control program and what it is, why it should matter, what the management zone involvement is, and what we actually do and will be doing in these priority 2 basins. And then give you an idea of how we're going to be identifying potential impacted residents who may have wells that are approaching the nitrate limit or above the limit, and talk a little bit about the conditions in our regions and why nitrate occurs, where it might be coming from, and then how many people might be affected by their wells being containing nitrate. And then important part of the plan that's going to be developed, we'll be talking about in detail in the presentation, but in coming months is the Drinking Water Early Action Plan, part of the preliminary management zone proposal, and talk about what the safe drinking water options are, and then how we can connect to community groups, but also the residences that we're going to be seeking. So the next slide. And the next. So Valley Water Collaborative was officially formed in 2020. We began our work in 2020. We're a nonprofit 501c3 organization. We have our administrative offices in Modesto. And you can see our mission there, really twofold, in that our goal of providing access to safe drinking water for residences impacted by nitrates. That's on our replacement water and solution set side of the program, where it was on the other side, the members of Valley Water, permit holders and the supporters of the program need to be working to protect and enhance the quality of groundwater that is ultimately used for drinking water. And there's a lot of effort that goes into the activities that these entities do now and in the near to medium term to try to reduce the impact of nitrates, or even eliminate, in many cases, the impact of nitrate on groundwater in these various basins. Okay, the next slide. We have a 12 board of directors, 12-member board of directors, made up of, as you see there, the 3 irrigated agriculture reps, 3 food processor winery industry sector representatives, 2 from the dairy industry, 1 from poultry, and then 3 from the cities that are based in the Modesto Turlock Basin. As we, okay, the next one. Actually, I don't think we included this slide, but I will be mentioning that the priority 2 basins. Yeah, go ahead to the next one. The priority 2 basins that are being added, you see listed here, starting on the west, the Delta Mendota Basin, which is essentially from Wesley down through Los Banos, Eastern San Joaquin or East San Joaquin Basin, which is Stockton area primarily, south and north of the city of Stockton. Then the Merced Basin and Madera Basins, which are pretty self-explanatory. Then we're also adding, very likely to add the Yolo Basin, which is located around the Davis Woodland area. They are actually having a meeting today to make the final determination whether they're going to be participating in Valley Water Collaborative. And these basins are prioritized, and Richard will talk a little bit about this. The Modesto Turlock were priority 1 areas, and these other 2 are priority 2 basins. Mostly because the workload for the regional board was such, they decided to choose 6 basins to start with, and then eventually add the priority 2 basins 3 years after the priority 1 basins received their notice to comply in the formation of the entities.
Perry, let's pause and ask the question. We have some, if anybody needs Spanish translation, we have a new participants.
Yeah, go ahead, Jesus.
Hola, bienvenidos a los que se están juntando a la junta. Tenemos la opción de escuchar la junta en español. Si desean escucharla en español, por favor, háganoslo saber por comentario, nos puede decir con su voz también.
Yeah, and if you want to raise your hand or physically or on Zoom, then we can make that switch, or you can switch over. And I guess Esmeralda, you're the latest one. Are you okay with English?
Yes, I'm fine. Thank
Okay.
you.
Good. All right, we'll go to the next slide. So since our early action plan was initiated in May 2021, we've been busy trying to locate and contact residences in those Modesto and Turlock Basin. basins, and to date we received about 1,300 applications for well testing. 780 of those wells went into our lab to be tested for nitrate and other contaminants. The other contaminants are supported and sponsored by a SAFER grant from the State Water Board that we were able to obtain. We have 564 households currently receiving bottled water as a result of their wells being contaminated with nitrate. And this, the SAFER grant, as I mentioned, we're in the year 3 of implementing that program. So we are going to launch essentially an identical program to what we did in the priority 1 basins. The benefit being that we won't be starting from the beginning. We'll have 3 years under our belt of developing outreach materials and postcards and such. So we're really starting. We're hitting the road running based on what we've been able to do in the priority 1 basins. And based on the timeline and that the nitrate control program sets out, we will be initiating our well testing outreach on February 26th of next year to all of the priority 2 basins. One of the things that we get questions about a lot, and I'll try to give a brief explanation, is we have 1,300 applications plus that you see there. We get applications, frankly, from all over the valley and nearby basins. We also get applications from people that are in public water systems, actually in cities that have safe water, but they saw the program, so they applied. So we have a lot of not duplication, but some that just frankly aren't qualified because of the reasons I stated. That so we don't ever send their names to our well testing company to do that water analysis. Okay, the next slide. So I'll hand it over to Richard, and he can talk about what the nitrate control program is.
All right. Thank you, Perry. Next slide. All right, so step back just a little bit and talk about the big picture here. Everything we're talking about today, starting with the formation of the Valley Water Collaborative, beginning of well testing programs, focus on nitrate and the like, goes back to the establishment of what's called the Nitrate Control Program, which is a regulation. So if you're familiar with state government, the state works to make sure water is safe for residents and businesses around the state. And one of the programs that's been established in the Central Valley region, where we are talking about today, is a regulation called the Nitrate Control Program. It was established in 2020. And as mentioned already, it has a kind of a rollout to it, a phased rollout or priority rollout, and thus the recognition of priority 1 versus priority 2. And there's another potential phase down the road we won't talk about today. The purpose of the program, if you just take all the regulatory language and break it down to 3 simple goals, the first and foremost, and they're not necessarily simple to implement, but they are basic goals. And the first one is to provide safe drinking water supplies with regards to those who have drinking water contaminated by nitrate. So the first focus, and that's mainly what we're talking about today, is what's that program going to look like in our new areas that we're beginning to develop the program. And also we can talk a little bit about what's been happening in the past. The second big goal is for sources of nitrate. There are a lot of activities that occur on the landscape. It could be a wastewater plant. It could be just the act of farming, dairies and the like. In the process of their activities, they can impact groundwater. And the big picture goal of the program is to reduce these kinds of impacts to water supplies, that is the groundwater, going forward into the future. And finally, again, a very long-term goal is where it's feasible, reasonable, feasible, and practical, kind of 3 key words there, is to try and restore groundwater quality. In other words, make it better. There are some areas that, as Barb will show in a few minutes, are pretty impacted by nitrate over the long term. And we have a goal of, where it's possible to, in the future, actually improve that water quality and groundwater. So these are 3 big picture goals. There are a lot of activities and requirements of the Nitrate Control Program that have different elements to them that are driving to achieve all of these goals over the long term. Perry already indicated, Valley Water Collaborative, a nonprofit organization, was formed to help implement this program in a portion of the Central Valley. If you are familiar, there are other entities in other parts of the Central Valley further south that also are implementing portions of the program in their particular areas, so you may have heard of them. already, but the Valley Water Collaborative is what our focus is today. And on the map here, you can see they've been active since 2021. And the focus has been on the two pink areas, Modesto and Turlock groundwater subbasins. These are very large areas where the program first was implemented as so-called priority 1 designated areas under the regulation. And so several years of hard work has been happening. There are water testing programs now. There are water replacement programs for those who have poor water and the like going on in these areas now. What's happening today in 2024 is we're now expanding the program. The regulation, as I said, is kind of a rollout program and moving into what are called priority 2 areas. Those are the pink or the orange areas, excuse me, on the map. And as the previous map showed, there's an area called the yellow subbasin further north that's not shown on this map that also is considering being part of the Valley Water Collaborative. So everything we talk about today in terms of rolling out this program and next steps in making sure local residents have safe drinking water with regards to nitrate contamination, we're focused now on expanding from these pink areas to the orange areas in the map. Next slide. All right, so again, fundamentals. Why are we doing this? Well, first of all, there's regulatory requirement, but that regulatory requirement has a foundation. And in part, that is the human right to water, which is a California policy that every human has a right to safe, clean, affordable, and accessible water adequate for not just human consumption, but for cooking and sanitary purposes. So when we implement the program, we are considering a broad policy being implemented across the state. Nitrate is a contaminant that's actually fairly common in groundwater. There's actually natural nitrate levels that you will find in groundwater, but because of activities that can occur on the land surface over long periods of time, you can actually get levels of nitrate too high where it's unsafe in the groundwater, which is a common water source for our drinking purposes. Nitrate itself is tasteless, it's odorless. You can have a glass of water, you can look at it and not know that it has very high levels of nitrate. You can't boil it out of your own water. There's special treatment requirements that are necessary to get nitrate out of water. And as I said, it's unhealthy to drink above certain levels. So it's a concern, and we want to make sure that everyone has safe drinking water wherever they're located within these priority 2 areas. Next slide. One of the key issues that comes up a lot in these discussions is, well, am I affected or not? And this kind of relates back in part to what Perry was just saying, where we get a lot of applications for participation in the program, and only so many actual locations get their wells tested and potentially become part of the water replacement program and get free drinking water. And a lot of it comes down to, where does your water come from? And there are a lot of people that get their water out of the tap. It comes from, it's piped into their homes as part of a public water system, which are a number of different types that are regulated by the state. And if you get your water in that way, then it's very likely your water is already safe to drink, because these facilities have significant regulations that they must comply with to actually provide water to your home. On the other hand, there's also a lot of people to get their water from a private domestic well. You have your own well in the backyard or on your property somewhere, and that water is piped into your home. And if you're obtaining your drinking water that way, it's a little more challenging to know, is that water safe to drink? One way to know if you're not sure whether where you get your water from is if you receive a bill in the mail and you pay a regular bill for your drinking water in your home. I can pretty much assure you it's very likely you're on a public water system, and those systems produce what are called consumer confidence reports. You can obtain those online or call the public water system, and they will provide information showing you what the quality of your water is. Our target for this program, though, is really the private domestic well owner, those who don't know what their water quality is. And the only way to find out is through programs like the ones we are setting up, where you actually have someone come out and test your water. You have to collect a sample from that well, send it to a laboratory that is certified to do the right kind of test, and get the results so you know whether or not your water is safe to drink. Next slide. So the Valley Water Collaborative is initiating the process in a broader area now of the Central Valley. As indicated, we started in a smaller area, and now we're expanding through this priority 2 effort. We have a lot of things that we'll be doing, and first and foremost is making sure you have safe drinking water where you live. We're working together with a lot of different entities. We are an organization. We provide support to the organization, but there's also a lot of other people within these priority 2 areas that have an interest to making sure that water is safe to drink. And so we share the cost collectively as organizations to implement good nitrate management for now and the future. We are working with the community. The process of what we're starting up today with this meeting is the beginning of a long-term process where we'll continually work with the community to identify solutions, not just now to have an immediate solution if your water is contaminated, but long-term solutions well into the future. Involvement is different ways. The so-called management zone that we're going to be forming within these different priority 2 areas. And a management zone is just a term of art that comes from the regulation. It's an area where various entities work together to manage nitrate. We already have a lot of entities working together: the growers, the dairies, the wastewater facilities, food processors, wineries, a lot of different entities involved. But we broaden that. We don't want just those folks involved. We want the actual users of the water involved as well. And so we come to you to get input as residents in the area. Next slide. So the process to get this effort going is first to begin to understand where is nitrate impacted in the groundwater. Again, our focus is groundwater. So where is nitrate impacting groundwater? And identify where it's likely residents are located and who those residents may be so we can target our program. Anyone within these areas can collaborate with the program, can ask to have a well tested once we get the program implemented. But our target is particularly those who are impacted by poor groundwater. The figure on the right is just an initial start, and Barb's going to talk more about this on a more local scale in a moment. But when you see a lot of bright red like that across the landscape, that's an indication that there's likely quite a bit of groundwater that may be contaminated by high nitrates. The Management Zone and Valley Water Collaborative are also making sure that the other elements of the nitrate control program are being implemented. As I started a few minutes ago, it's not just safe drinking water, but we also want to make sure that going forward, reduce future impacts to groundwater by better managing nitrate collectively, and at the same time also address how we might be able to make water quality better in the future. We do that through a process of submittal of various documents over a period of time and actually implement what those documents say we should do to manage nitrate. Next slide. And with that, I am going to turn it over to Barb, who is going to talk about process to identify potentially impacted residents. Maybe I should pause to see if there's any questions at this point. All right, then Barb, are you ready to go? Okay.
Sure. Thanks, Richard. As Richard said, I'm going to focus this next part of the presentation on some of the science that helps us identify areas where nitrate is high and might be unsafe, and sort of translate that into figuring out how many domestic wells and residents might be affected by nitrate. Next slide, please. So in order to locate the areas where drinking water is affected by nitrate, we did some research on groundwater conditions. So this involved gathering and compiling a whole bunch of nitrate concentration data from wells throughout the area. A lot of that data was publicly available through the state and federal databases, but we also requested some other data that might not be as easily accessible by asking different county departments for additional data. So their Department of Health or Environmental Services, sometimes they have additional data that we could use to supplement that publicly available data. So we used all of that data and we tried to focus on the upper zone of the groundwater system. Now, what I mean here is, if you look at this cross section, this image on the right-hand side of the slide, if you could imagine slicing the earth like a slice of cake, you have different layers within it. Different wells are drilled into different layers of that cake, or of the groundwater aquifers, as we call it. So the portion that we're focusing on the most is the upper area where private domestic wells are pumping water from. So we looked at all the data that we could find. We categorized it. We looked at recent data only because we don't really need to worry about what nitrate concentrations were in wells 50 years ago. We kind of need to know what they are today. So we looked at a recent subset of that data, and we used a mapping tool called spatial interpolation, which is basically a fancy way of saying, let's use what we know to guess what's in between in the areas where we don't know. Next slide, please. So So the map on the right-hand side is a result of that research, collecting all that data and using that mapping tool. So the color scheme, as Richard mentioned, the red areas are where nitrate is high in groundwater and actually above that safe drinking water limit. So we are most interested in those areas because we need to help provide safe drinking water to the people that are relying on that water for their drinking water supply. So using the mapping techniques, we can locate areas where unsafe levels of nitrate are in drinking water. We can identify private domestic wells in those areas that might be unsafe, and also look at those public water systems that have an existing way of dealing with nitrate in groundwater. So some of the public water systems in the area have, already realized that they have high nitrate. And so they have a treatment process or they have a blending process so that to ensure that what they serve to their residents is safe to drink. So we look at that as well. The next series of maps that I'm going to show you are for each different subbasin. So a subbasin is just a geographical area, right? So if you remember the map a few slides ago with the different colors where Modesto and Turlock were pink and then the other areas were in orange, we're just going to focus on the orange areas. Those are the priority 2 subbasins, and those are the areas where hopefully you people in the audience are residents of. So that's what we're focusing on next. Next slide, please. So we'll start with the Delta Mendota, which was that south, the skinny long one on the west side. Go ahead, next slide, please. So using all of that data, this map on the right-hand side is just a zoomed in version where you can actually see all of the wells, the well locations that we use that had nitrate concentration, recent nitrate concentration in that area of groundwater, in that layer of cake that is where domestic wells are being pumped, where they pump the water from. So you can already see, we have some red areas up in the north near Wesley and in between Patterson and Gustine, around Los Banos, and then kind of in the south and southwest. And again, if it's red and orange, those are the places where we are most interested in. If it's yellow or green, light green or dark green, those are areas where it's low, nitrate concentrations are low, safe to drink. Next slide, please. So using that mapping technique with the different colors and using what we know about public water system boundaries, so we know the areas that residents are able to access drinking water from a public water system and aren't relying on private domestic wells, most likely. We can do some more mapping analysis to calculate or estimate the number of private domestic wells and the population of people that might be in areas where groundwater has high concentrations of nitrate. So for the Delta Mendota subbasin, if you look at the table on the right, I know there's a lot of numbers here, so I'm just gonna summarize it for you. There's about 480 domestic wells in areas of elevated nitrate. So those little black dots on the left-hand side that are overlaying red and orange areas add up to about 480 private domestic wells. And so those are the wells that we need to help provide safe drinking water for. And that translates to about 28,700 people in those red and orange areas. Next slide, please. Okay, so now we'll shift up to the north to Eastern San Joaquin. Next slide, please. And here we go. This is the view of the world in terms of the upper zone, that upper groundwater aquifer cake slice where the domestic wells are pumping from. And all those white dots means that's where we had data. That's where we had concentration information about nitrate in groundwater since 2010, so recent data. Next slide, please. So again, we can overlay those layers of mapping to look at the locations of domestic wells and to look at the public water system boundaries and use that information to help estimate these numbers. So again, I'm not going to go through all the numbers on the table, but we'll focus in on the orange and red areas. And that turns into about 1,300 domestic wells. If you look at the black dots in the red and orange areas, it adds up to about 1,300 domestic wells that might be impacted by elevated nitrate. And that translates to about 28,000 people, mostly in the Manteca, Ripon, and Escalon areas in the southwest, but also a little bit in the north of Lodi. Next slide, please. Okay, so now we'll shift to Merced, just south of the Eastern San Joaquin. And again, we have the same sort of view of the world here. We have the control points, which means we had well data and the red to green scaling of concentrations. Again, the red means bad. Red and orange are the ones that we're most concerned with. Next slide, please. So you can see how here we have a large red area in the northwest area, the left side of the map. But you can tell that there aren't as many domestic wells in the bottom part of that red area. So the concentration of wells is much higher in the northern area. And that's near Atwater and Livingston area. So, and there's a little bit south of Merced as well. So when we go to do outreach and really target those people to try and make sure that we can get them access to clean and safe drinking water. So those will be our focus areas. And when we look at the numbers, it's a little less than the last subbasin that we just had, but for Merced, there's about 550 private domestic wells in the red and orange areas and about 20,000 people. Next slide, please. So the last area that I'm going to talk about is the Madera subbasin, and that's just south of Chowchilla. And you can tell here there aren't as many big red areas, right? Madera looks kind of nice. There's only a few little red and orange areas. Most of it is green and yellow, which means that a lot of the groundwater in this area is actually probably safe to drink. So next slide, please. So when we look at the distribution or the locations of all of the different domestic wells, we can see that there are a lot less domestic wells in those red and orange, those black dots in the red and orange areas. So for Madera, this translates to only 86 private domestic wells that might be in areas with elevated nitrate, which translates to about 3,500 people. So I'll pause here. And if anybody has any questions about the science or the process that we use to estimate all these numbers, please let me know. Okay, Maureen, I guess you can move on. Thank you.
All right, I'm back. So let's talk briefly about what's coming in terms of development and implementation for a developing management zone, and that is what we call the early action plan. And so if you can, next slide, please. All right, so again, nitrate control program, series of regulations and requirements. And one of those key requirements is, as we said, to provide safe drinking water for those impacted by nitrate. And the way we begin that is the development and establishment of what we call the early action plan. And it's called early because it's what we're going to do first, recognizing that the process to identify long-term solutions well into the future can take some time. given the complexity of the problems of making sure everyone has safe drinking water. So the early action plan is our first key deliverable. It's part of the establishment of the management zone that we are working on right now. And this is what Perry referred to at the beginning, that we would begin implementation, just begin per regulation requirements, targeting February 26th of 2025. So about 6 months from now. The early action plan sets up kind of the process of finding out how would you as a resident contact the Valley Water Collaborative. How would you get your well tested? Anybody can have their well tested, even though Barb showed a series of maps of where we think it's most likely within these different areas that well owners might be impacted by high nitrate. Anyone within those management zones that are developing can have their well tested. What we're worried about is finding wells that are have unsafe levels of nitrates. A little graphic there on the bottom shows a range of numbers, and the requirements for safe drinking water for nitrate is set at 10 milligrams per liter mg/L. So what we're looking for is looking at laboratory results from a well test, and if we find that it's greater than 10, we know we have a well that is providing water that's unsafe to drink because of nitrate. If it's less than 10, it could mean it's close, or it could be problematic in time. And that's something we'll talk about in just a moment. And the early action plan addresses that. But we also may find that you're in the green or the yellow area where it's actually relatively low nitrate and the water is perfectly safe to drink for nitrate. The plan that we're going to be developing, and we will want input on from the community over the next few months, is to set up to create a process for well owners to find out what is the quality of their water. Next slide. So in most simplest way to say this is that once we establish the plan and once we begin implementation, we provide a mechanism that you as a well owner can contact the Valley Water Collaborative and ask, I don't know what my nitrate levels are. Can you help me out? When that request comes in, a process goes through again to verify you're within the management zone. As Perry said, we get a lot of applications from outside the management zone, or we find out a resident actually is already receiving water from a public system that's already regulated, and we can show them how to get information to see that their well is, or their water in their house is perfectly safe to drink. But again, a lot of people are on wells, so we want to be sure that those people have an opportunity to have their well tested. When you contact us and we find that you're in the management zone and you're a private well owner, we would send out a representative to your home, coordinate with you on that, go out to your well and have it tested at no cost to you. It'll be tested for nitrate. If it meets some other requirements of the SAFER program that Perry mentioned earlier, there might be an opportunity for testing of some other contaminants, but the early action plan is focused primarily on nitrate first. We would test the well. We would provide you with the results of that test when it comes back from the laboratory. If it's above 10, you immediately we begin working with the homeowner to work with them to get replacement water, because it is unsafe if it's above 10. If it's down in the lower range here, what we call low to moderate, let's say under 7.5 milligrams per liter, we've done the test. You can be satisfied that you have safe drinking water coming out of your well with regards to nitrate. But what if you're kind of in that gray zone, the orange so-called on the screen here? It's high, but it's still safe to drink. Anything under 10 is considered safe to drink. But frankly, water quality within groundwater, particularly more shallow groundwater, can vary from year to year. And so we do build a mechanism into the early action plan where we will provide an opportunity for a free annual follow-up well test to be sure that your well is not actually getting higher with regards to its nitrate content. That's particularly important for those who get tests back that say it's a 9 or 9.5, something that's relatively high. We want to come back and test it at a later date. Next slide. The early action plan includes different options that are established in the plan for providing safe drinking water if you actually do get a well test it's above 10. What's on the screen here are 3 basic approaches. These are being considered as part of the development of the action plan. They've been considered and implemented in different ways in other management zones that are the so-called priority ones, the ones where the program was originally rolled out. I think all of them right now, there are 6 of those programs are receiving home bottled water delivery if well test exceeds 10. So you get that result back. The management zone works with you immediately to set up a mechanism that you get bottled water to your home, again, at no cost to the homeowner. We provide that water for you so you have sufficient water that is safe to drink. On the right side, there's also a mechanism that's occurring in a few places in the Central Valley where what we call water fill stations or kiosks are established at a local place that is a common place where people may gather, where you can actually bring a bottle or a series of bottles and fill up those bottles at no cost so that you have water that you can take back home. That's an alternative way to provide replacement water. There's also possibility in certain situations of doing what's called a point of use treatment system. This is where someone has to come into your home and actually install some equipment into your home that treats the water before it comes out of your faucet. We're not doing too much of that at this point, but that may be a mechanism, and we'll talk about those in future meetings. Next slide. So looking ahead, Perry, do you want to take it or you want me to continue?
Yeah, go ahead, Dave. Go ahead and continue, Richard.
All right, we're wrapping up here. So let's talk about moving ahead. So some key dates. Next slide. All right, so this is a little roadmap to talk about where we are in, again, implementation nitrate control program, establishment of a management zone, and very importantly, this early action plan that I was just talking about. So we're in the upper left. We're here. The regional board, the regulatory authority has told all priority 2 areas to work on getting these plans established in the priority 2 sub-basins that Barb was just describing. Key component of that is this early action plan, the red text there, but it's part of a larger document that's called the preliminary management zone proposal. That's work that we as Valley Water Collaborative are doing to establish formally a management zone, which is a requirement under the regulation. We're working with communities and residents. The key element of that you want to pay attention to and participate in is the actual early action plan. We are required to submit that to the regulators by December 28th, so just 4 months out. That action plan will begin implementation no later than February 26th. Again, that's dictated by the regulation, has to be done within 60 days of submittal. So assume right now by February 26th, you can call the Valley Water Collaborative and ask for a well test. Then the management zone continues to have to develop other regulatory documents. These are the documents that are required to meet all the goals of the nitrate control program, not just the safe drinking water element for nitrate. As we talked about, reduction of nitrate to groundwater in the future, restoring groundwater quality in the future. These are addressed and how that will happen in these other plans called the final management zone proposal and so-called management zone implementation plan. The final plan, that management zone implementation plan, does include a program for long-term solutions. So again, while we're really focused on early action right now, making sure we address the immediate problems in the short term, the ultimate goal is to make sure everyone within these management zones has safe drinking water well into the future. How that gets done and the process for that is in the management zone implementation plan to be developed at a later date. Regardless of how that plays out, the early action plan always continues to be implemented within these management zones until a long-term solution is available. Next slide. So this is our first outreach to you as a community. We will repeat this presentation on Thursday evening this week, just providing an alternative time. It's the same presentation. If you know folks who might be interested, please let them know. It's an opportunity to hear this presentation again. Been very introductory at this point. We will come back for at least 2 more events between now and submittal of these plans in December. We're planning latter part of September. Right now, the week of September 23rd, we'll come back and talk in much more detail about what we talk about in early action plan, what might go into there, and much more detail in just a couple slides. And then the week of October 28th, we'll talk about what we have kind of finalized. It's not permanent yet, but what we're moving towards as an early action plan for these areas, and also talk about it in the context of the bigger picture of the nitrate control program. And even though this is what we plan for the fall, understand that once the early action plan is implemented, there will be continued community outreach to make sure everybody is aware. We actually ramp up even more comprehensively outreach to the local community to get the word out that there's a well testing program in your area. obviously anybody can help get the word out to let their neighbors know and the like. And next slide. So then as a final, obviously questions, we appreciate those. Here's some various contact information. If you're really into looking at regulatory documents and kind of getting an idea of what's coming in terms of the bigger picture, or if you want to just look at an existing early action plan that's being implemented in other areas, for example, the Modesto or Turlock subbasin, the fourth bullet down from the top, example management zone documents, there's a place you can go and actually look at those documents. That'd give you maybe a better picture of what's coming. And then, of course, contact information for our speakers today and the Valley Water Collaborative. And always feel free to reach out anytime. That's all, Perry.
Yeah, one thing that I want to add and emphasize is that with any of the organizations that are represented in this call, we are always looking for venues and contacts within these communities where we might be able to set up a booth. Ezra and Jesus have been to countless events, handing out flyers and talking to potential applicants. So we're always open to get recommendations on these groups where we can reach our very targeted public. We have certainly found it a challenge to get people to apply, more so than I would ever thought when we started. Having a free well test and free water, you would think people would flock to you, but it really takes multiple impacts is not the right word, but excuse me, seeing us at the farmer's market, getting a postcard, reading about us in the paper. That tends to be what our applicants respond in a survey that we do when they apply. They say it's usually multiple times of seeing us and hearing about us that they finally apply. So we're always looking for ideas and venues where we can get the message out. Obviously, in these new areas, we've already established some contacts through our industry sources, but we're always looking for good ideas and good places to advertise our program here in the coming years. So I encourage you, don't hesitate to offer us some ideas and locations where we might be able to display our goods. Other than that, any questions from others? And I see in the chat, yes, we will be posting this on our website. We'll post this in the area where we have previous meetings and PowerPoints posted, but it'll be labeled as this event. And the other thing to mention, I'll just reiterate too, is that as soon as the GEI Ludorf group has the first draft ready, if we can beat those dates that we listed, we will be advertising more events where we will do both hybrid, we'll do both in person and Zoom, so we can start gathering comments and about our draft plans. So keep an eye out. Once you're on our list, you will be getting notifications for the basins that you select. We have these multiple basins, and on the sign up on our website, we have these boxes that you can check for the basins that you'd like to be included on for notifications. So Maureen or Eva, our program folks here, anything else to emphasize or bring up for the presentation?
No, that was great. Thank you.
Well then, thanks all for attending, and drop us a note or if you've got any other questions. And as we said, watch the website for the posting of this presentation. Thanks for attending.
Thank you.
Thanks all.